Hey guys, Dr. John here. Quick heads up, you're going to hear some new intro music and a new sound on the show. Let's just say we have the technology to do this. Bigger, better, stronger. All right, let's go. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 48 of the Men's Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Moore, and I'm a licensed therapist out of Chicago, Illinois. And you know what else? I'm so glad you're here. Okay, I have a question for you, so listen up. Have you been musterbating? No, for real, have you been? I mean, did you do it last night or maybe even this morning? Whew. Yep, you heard that right. And no, it's not that kind of episode. But if your brain went there for a second, perfect, you're awake. Let's use that. Oh, and real quick, later in the show, we're also going to hear from a listener who isn't sure he's ready to marry the woman he's been dating, and I'll have more about that later. So you got to be wondering, what on earth is Dr. John talking about with this musterbation thing? And to be clear, that's musterbation, M-U-S-T. Well, it's a real term, coined by a legend in my field named Albert Ellis, and it describes something you're possibly doing right now, without even knowing it. And when I say that, I'm talking about these invisible rules that a lot of us have deeply embedded in our psyche. They go something like this. I must succeed. I should be further along at this stage of the game. My life must look a certain way. And those little words, should, must, have to, they're quietly making you feel anxious, angry, ashamed, and straight up resentful. And you know what else? They're making you feel emotionally exhausted. Does this sound familiar? Well, I can tell you this is the kind of thing that comes up in therapy on a regular basis, particularly for men. So here's what I'm going to do for you today. I'm going to show you how to catch these demands and how to challenge them with the goal of replacing them with something stronger and healthier. Not fake positive thinking or pretending you don't care, and definitely not walking around saying everything is wonderful when it clearly isn't. I'm talking about learning how to want something deeply without convincing yourself you can't survive unless you get it. By the end of this episode, I have a feeling you're going to hear your own thoughts differently. That's the mindset shift. That's the promise. And so that's what I've got for you today. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Come on, doc. Is a word like should really ruining my life? That sounds like therapist talk and some psychobabble nonsense. I get it. I really do. But just stay with me. Because by the time I tell you about a guy named Patrick, you're going to see exactly how one little word can carry a mountain on its back. Now, before we go any further, quick disclaimer. This podcast isn't designed as a substitute for mental health counseling, and I'm not your personal therapist. It's best to think of our time together as educational in nature, with the hope of helping you to become a better version of you. Today's pod is sponsored by the folks at BetterHelp, and I'll have more to say on them later. Okay then, let's get right to it. Are you ready? So here's the interesting part. Most people think it's the situation that's upsetting them. It's not. Let me explain. So not too many years ago, I was working with a guy we'll call Patrick. He was 35 years old and from an area called Bridgeport. When I say Bridgeport, take a deep breath and let your mind picture the Chicago White Sox and working class people, because that's the real deal vibe on that part of town. And nah, guys, we're not doing the whole White Sox versus Cubs thing. Don't even ask me who I root for. That's a whole nother pod, and I still got to live in this town. Anyway, back to this client. Patrick came to me for help with self-esteem. Specifically, he struggled with not feeling good enough, not being at the place in life he thought he should be at. And I gotta say this, from the outside looking in, Patrick was successful, good-looking guy, hard worker, made good money, beautiful family that he loved dearly. But again, that was from the outside looking in. But with all of that going for him, the guy was miserable as a polar bear in July. On paper, Patrick was winning at life. Inside his own head, he was losing. And it all came down to one thing. He couldn't stop comparing his real life to an imaginary rule book. Instead of seeing how well he was actually doing, he was drowning, just drowning in his own shoulds. So on one particularly cold-ass Chicago afternoon, Patrick comes in for his third session. He sits down, visibly frustrated, looks me right in the eye and says, "Hey doc, I feel like I should be over this BS by now, don't you think? I'm 35, not 25, you know?" Now let's pause for a moment. I want you to catch what Patrick just said. He said, should. He didn't say, I'd like to be over this. He didn't say, I hope to be over this. For him, it was should. And that little word, well, it was carrying a lot of emotional baggage. Okay, back to that session. So I just looked at him and said, "Patrick, according to who?" He kind of blinked back at me, totally thrown. "What do you mean?" And I said, "Who decided there's a universal law that says you should be past this by 35? Where is that rule written? Because I can't find it." And the room went quiet for a few seconds, as quiet as a church on Monday. And then he started smiling, and then laughing. I mean, the guy about fell out of his chair because it hit him. He wasn't measuring himself against reality. He was measuring himself against a rule he made up in his own head. And listen, we all do this. I've certainly done it. A lot. Have you ever caught yourself thinking any of these? I should have a better job. My marriage should be easier. My kids should appreciate me. I shouldn't feel anxious. I must have my whole life figured out by the time I'm 35. Sound familiar? Here's the truth, and I want you to really hear this one. Life doesn't usually hurt us first. Our interpretation of life does. Sit with that for a second. It's not the event, it's the meaning we attach to it. And when that meaning is built on rigid demands, you know, those invisible musts, we end up creating way more suffering than the situation ever could on its own. That right there is one of the biggest ideas in all of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, or REBT for short. Now look guys, I know I just got a little woo on you, but here's the thing. Woo is only woo until it's not. And this is where I want to bring it back to you. Because Patrick had an imaginary rule book, and as I've shared, I've had one too. And if I were a betting man in Vegas, I'd put money on it that you've got one of your own. So let me ask you something. What are the invisible rules you've been dragging around? Maybe yours says, I should be making more money by now. Maybe it's, I must be further along in my career. My relationship should be easier, or I shouldn't feel anxious. I should be stronger than this. Shit, yours could even be something like, if I slow down, I'm going to drop the ball or somehow fall behind. Know what I mean? Now here's something I've noticed after a lot of years working with overachievers. And if I'm being real with you, I've done a fair amount of overachieving myself. One of the hallmarks of what I call overachievement syndrome is this. You never feel like you're good enough. You hit one goal and then another, and instead of enjoying it, you immediately move the finish line. Here's some examples. You get the promotion, but now you need the bigger title. You buy that house, but now it needs to be bigger. You earn more money, but somehow it's still not enough. You lose 20 pounds, and then start criticizing yourself about the 5 you haven't lost. You can be winning by almost every objective measure while still feeling like you're losing. Why? Because you're not living according to reality. You're living according to an internal demand. And a lot of the time, those demands didn't even start with us. In psychology, we sometimes use the word introjects. Now stay with me for a moment. I promise I'm not about to turn this into a graduate seminar. An introject is simply a message we hear from someone early in life and then carry inside. After hearing it enough times, we begin repeating it in our subconscious. Maybe it came from your mom or your dad or some other caretaker. Could have been a teacher or coach. For some, it's religious leaders. And sometimes, those messages come from trauma or an abusive background. I mean, this shit is complicated, but I think you get my drift, because listeners to this pod tend to be enlightened. Anyway, so a child may hear, "You're never going to amount to anything," or "Stop crying," or "Don't you dare embarrass this family," or "Why can't you be like your older brother?" And here's the thing about the subconscious mind. It hears everything, and it never forgets. And guys, I'm here to tell you, those messages can stay with us long after the person who first delivered them is gone. Eventually, we stop hearing dad's voice or mom's voice, or the voice of that coach who humiliated us. Instead, those voices are replaced with our own. I must be successful. I should never need help. I must prove that I'm worthy. I can't let anyone see me struggle. And after a while, we don't even question the rule. We just obey it. Now, I want to be clear about something. Not every parent or caretaker who gave us these messages was trying to hurt us. Some thought they were motivating us, and some were repeating what had been said to them. The truth is, they may have been doing the best they could at the time. But regardless of where the message came from, we're the ones carrying it now, and we're the ones paying the emotional price. And let me tell you, just because a message has been living inside your head for 30 years doesn't mean it gets to live there rent-free forever. So in just a moment, I'm going to show you how to start evicting some of these musts and shoulds. But first, a quick break to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. So it's time for me to get real with you, like big time real. Some of you already know that I lost my identical twin brother. I was absolutely devastated when it happened, and during the immediate aftermath of his death, I found myself saying things like, I should be handling this better. I'm a therapist, for crying out loud. I shouldn't feel this lost. I should be stronger than this. And then eventually, another thought crept in. I should be over this by now. That's pretty messed up when you think about it, but that's how it was for me. That was my lived experience. And as I share that with you now, I still feel the deep pain of that loss. I think I always will. I mean, how could I not, you know? But going through that taught me something important. Being trained in mental health doesn't mean I can always see what's happening inside my own head. Sometimes we're simply too close to our own stuff to see it clearly. And sometimes it takes another trained set of ears to help us recognize what we're carrying and figure out what to do with it. And because this one is personal for me, I'm just going to come out and say it. Today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is where I took my own grief. Yep, that's right. Your host sees a therapist. I started therapy after my brother died, and I continue having sessions today. Because being a therapist doesn't make me immune to grief. It doesn't make me immune to distorted thinking. And it definitely doesn't mean I always have everything figured out. Trust me on that one. So it's like this. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier. You begin by taking a short quiz, and BetterHelp matches you with a licensed therapist quickly. And sometimes the first therapist isn't the right fit. That happens. With BetterHelp, you can switch therapists anytime at no additional cost. No drama or awkward explanation. You can simply find someone who feels like a better match. So here's my ask. Click the link in the episode description or go to betterhelp.com/guycounseling and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Full disclosure, that's an affiliate link, and using it helps support the production of this show. But more importantly, if you've been carrying a lot lately and trying to handle all of it on your own, maybe it's time to let somebody else into the conversation. Maybe BetterHelp is your next step. All right, guys, the break's over. Let's get back to the show. Okay, welcome back. All right, so at the top of the show, I made you a promise. I told you I'd show you how to deal with all these shoulds and musts, and now it's time to deliver. Here's the system. Catch it, challenge it, replace it. That's it. 3 steps. And listen, I didn't invent this stuff. This comes straight out of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy by that guy I mentioned earlier, Albert Ellis. He built his whole career on it. And let me tell you, it works. Here's step 1, and it's a biggie. Catch it. You can't change a thought you never notice. So this week, I want you to start listening for those musts and shoulds running around in your own head. And I'll warn you, these things are sneaky. And that's because they don't sound like opinions, they sound like facts. Be mindful of shit like this. I should be over this, and I must not fail, or I must be a complete idiot. And every time you hear one, just flag it. That's all. You're not fighting it yet, you're just catching it in the act. Step 2, challenge it. And here's where I let you in on a secret. When I asked Patrick, according to who, that wasn't just a clever comeback. That's literally the technique. In REBT, we call it disputation. You put the demand on trial. Now here's a few that run along the same lines. According to who, and where's it written, and where's the evidence that this rule is real? And here's my favorite question. Is this rule actually helping me, or is it just beating me up? Most of these rules cannot survive cross-examination. They fall apart the second you ask for their credentials. Just like Patrick's did. One question, and the guy's laughing at a rule that had been crushing him for years. Step 3, replace it. You don't just delete the demand and leave a hole. You swap it for a preference. Watch how this works. I must succeed becomes, I would strongly prefer to succeed, and I'm gonna work hard for it. But my worth as a man doesn't hang on the outcome. I should be over this by now is replaced by, I'd really like to be further along. I'm going to keep doing the work, and I can accept that healing doesn't run on my schedule. And here's another example. My girlfriend must understand me gets transformed into, I really want my partner to understand me. I'm going to keep communicating, and I can handle it when they don't get it perfectly every time. You hear the difference? You didn't stop caring, and you didn't lower your standards. You still want the thing. You just stop betting your self-worth on the outcome. Remember our betting man in Vegas? He's still playing the hand. He's just not pushing his whole life into the middle of the table. Know what I mean? Because a preference says, I want this, and I'll pursue it. Whereas a demand says, I must have this, or I'm worthless, or I can't cope, or something's wrong with me. One of those statements is toxic, and the other is restorative. See the difference? You can want a great life without demanding it every second. You can have goals without turning them into a stick you beat yourself with. And you can hold yourself to a high standard without holding yourself hostage. So here's what I did for you guys. I found a free worksheet over at the Therapist Aid website. It's the same kind of tool many therapists use with clients, including me. I'll drop the link in today's show notes. Grab it, print it, use it. Wow, we covered a lot there. Let's get to today's mailbag. So before we dive into today's listener email, just a quick note. The message you're about to hear is authentic. The name and certain identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. You're going to hear it in a synthesized voice for that same reason. Plus, I just think it makes it easier to follow, you know? Okay, here we go.
Hello, Dr. John. I'm 35 and I've been dating my girlfriend for a little over 3 years. I love her and we've talked about marriage, but lately I feel like everyone around us is putting on the pressure. My parents keep asking when I'm going to propose, and her family keeps making comments about weddings and grandkids. Even our friends joke that it's about time. The problem is I'm not sure I'm ready. We've had some disagreements over the years that still bother me, and while we've worked through most of them, I don't know if there's signs I should pay attention to or if I'm just overthinking everything. Part of me worries that if I don't propose soon, I'll lose her. The other part worries I'll rush into a marriage because everyone else thinks it's the next step. How do you know if you're honestly not ready or if you're just afraid of making a commitment?
Okay, and he signed that, Matt from the Northwest. You know, I can't tell you how many times this has come up in therapy with men over the years. It's incredibly common, and it usually comes with a lot of uncertainty and worry. So let me share with you what I shared with Matt. Ready? Here it is. Hi, Matt. One thing that really stood out to me in your email is that you never said you don't love your girlfriend. What you said is that you're not sure you're ready, and those are two very different things. And then I added, marriage is one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make. It's not something to rush into because your parents are asking questions, or because her family keeps making comments, or because your friends think it's about time. And that's because those people aren't the ones who will be living the marriage. You are. Now, you also mentioned that there have been disagreements in the relationship that still bother you. I don't know what those disagreements were, and I don't want to speculate here, but I do think those disagreements are worth taking seriously. Not because disagreement automatically means the relationship is wrong, but because unresolved issues have a way of following people into marriage. They don't disappear just because there was a wedding. Now, here's something I've noticed over the years. People often think premarital counseling is only for couples who are already in trouble, but it really isn't. Think of it less as trying to fix a relationship and more as trying to understand it. So the goal isn't to convince you to get married, and it's not to convince you to walk away either. Instead, the goal is to help both of you make an important life decision with clear eyes. Now, for those listening, I'm cutting out a lot of detail here, but I added this. Many communities offer premarital counseling to help couples tackle the big stuff, finances, conflict, and most importantly, what each person actually expects marriage to look like. Sometimes those conversations reassure a couple that they're ready, and sometimes they reveal areas that need more work. Either way, that's useful information. There's also a book I've recommended over the years called Before You Say I Do by H. Norman Wright and Wes Roberts. It walks couples through the conversations worth having before making a lifelong commitment. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So Matt, I'm going to leave you with this. Don't confuse outside pressure with inner readiness. They are not the same thing. You don't owe anyone a proposal just because you've reached a certain age or because you've been together a certain number of years. But here's what you do owe. You owe yourself and your girlfriend an honest conversation. What I'm talking about is a real conversation, Matt. One about what's holding you back, what those disagreements mean to you, and whether the two of you are willing to sit with those concerns together. That's a very different thing from mumbling, maybe someday, just to make the pressure stop. You might be ready, but scared. And then again, you might not be ready at all. Either way, make sure the decision comes from clarity, not pressure. I wish both of you the very best. So that was my response to Matt and his situation. Can you relate to what he shared? Or maybe you know someone who can? Because here's the truth, guys. Marriage is one of the biggest decisions a person can make. And for a lot of men, it's also one of the biggest sources of anxiety, uncertainty, and pressure. There's nothing unusual about that. I hope something I shared today was helpful to you. Maybe it gave you a different way of looking at things. Or maybe it simply reminded you that you're not alone when you're wrestling with one of life's bigger decisions. But here's what I really want to emphasize. Taking a beat to get clear on your feelings isn't a sign of weakness, and it certainly doesn't mean your relationship is doomed. It just means you care enough about your future and your partner's future to make sure you're walking into it for the right reasons. I'll leave it there. Wow, folks, we really covered a lot today. Just look at what we explored as part of this pod. We examined the concept of musturbations and how self-statements can cause us to become prisoners of our own self-talk. We also explored how Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, or REBT, can be used to create positive change. And remember, I've dropped a link in the show notes to the worksheet I discussed in that segment. And we heard from Matt, who shared his deep struggles with the idea of getting married. That really was a lot, folks. Before we wrap things up, I want to give a quick shout out to a listener named Harry, who recently left a really kind review of the show on Apple. Harry wrote that the podcast has helped him tremendously over the years, and that the content has helped him for the better. Harry, I don't know whether you'll hear this, but I just want to say thank you. Honestly, that really made my day, and I'm genuinely grateful that you took the time to write that. And listen, for everyone else, if you enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you do 2 quick things for me. First, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And the second thing is to please consider leaving a review wherever you might listen. I don't pretend to know how all of these algorithms work, but it's my understanding that the more positive reviews we get, the more likely the platforms are to show this pod to others. Here's the truth, brothers. This is an independently produced show. I don't have big media companies backing me up. And if I'm being real with you, I'm not sure I'd want that anyway. Your support means the world to me, and it helps spread the word, so thank you. Oh, if you have a question you'd like me to consider for a future listener email segment, head over to guycounseling.com and use the contact form. I'll leave a direct link in the show notes. I may not be able to respond personally to every message, and not every question will make it onto the podcast, but I do read what you send. As always, thank you to my producer, Joel Oliver, for helping put today's program together. And most of all, thank you for spending part of your day with me. So here's your homework. Send positive energy to someone you don't know. It could be a total stranger or just someone random you pass by. The goal is to say something nice or simply use your mind's eye to project a beam of happiness in their direction. Now, how woo is that? Be good to yourself, guys. Remember, you're worthy of love and of loving someone else. Take good care. I'll see you on the next episode of the Men's Self-Help Podcast.